All right, welcome everybody. It's 6 o'clock and we will get started. First, I'd like to acknowledge the Whadjuk people as the traditional owners of the greater Fremantle-Wall-Yallup area, and we recognize that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still important today. I also acknowledge that we meet here today on land that was never ceded, and I wholeheartedly support the many campaigns for truth-telling, justice, and reconciliation, both here and across the country. For folks that may have not been here before, this meeting is being recorded and streamed live online. While all care is taken to maintain privacy, visitors in the public gallery and members of the public submitting a question may be captured in the recording. So we'll start with attendance, apologies, and leaves of absence. I have three leaves of absence here. Councillor Jeff Graham from Friday the 3rd April to Tuesday the 26th April inclusive. Can I have someone move and second that? Moved Councillor Kamada, seconded by Councillor Slaughter. All those in favor? Thank you. Councillor Moughlin requests leave of absence from Wednesday 8th of April to Friday 17th of April inclusive, 2026. Moved by Councillor Graham, seconded by Councillor Sullivan. All those in favor? There we go. And the last leave that I have before me here is Councillor Kamada requests a leave of absence from Saturday the 22nd of August to Sunday the 30th of August inclusive. And that's moved by Councillor Moughlin, seconded by Councillor Graham. All those in favor? Wonderful. Any other leaves of absence? No? Seeing none, we'll move on to disclosures of interest by members. Are there any interest to disclose? No? All right. And responses to previous public questions taken on notice. So those can be found in the agenda. And if folks want to read those, they can find those on the agenda, which is available online, or if you have a printed copy before you. Now, tonight is our first meeting of the month, which is generally our planning-focused meeting. So we have public question time, and then we have planning items. And what we try to do is, right now I have 6 speakers with 1 general question and 5 to speak on items that are on the agenda. So you'll have 3 minutes to speak, whether you speak during public question time or if you want to speak before the item that's on the agenda. What we'll do is we'll move those items where there's speakers first. That way then you can speak to the item before the council goes into debate. But if you prefer, you can speak during public question time as well. And then you're more than welcome to stay or leave as the item is debated or watch it online or whatever is most convenient for you. Does that make sense? Okay, great. So in public question time, I have 1 question from Kat Goddard. Now, at about 3 minutes, you'll hear a little chime. So if you haven't finished your question, we just ask that you try to wrap up as quickly as you can after that. Thank you.
Good evening to the City, the Mayor and elected members. My name is Kat Goddard and I have been a North Ward resident for 15 years. I first approached Council in January 2024 regarding the installation of a marine barrier at our local town river beach, Harvey Beach, and I understand this issue has likely been raised many times before. For many in our community, Harvey Beach is more than just a beach. It is a sanctuary, an institution and a rite of passage. Previous concerns raised by Council has focused on parking and amenities. However, most residents access Harvey Beach on foot or bike. This could also present an opportunity to install much needed public facilities in the future, as North Fremantle currently lacks. Existing water and sewage connections, along with the underutilised space west of the Water Police Station, could support this at a later stage. But the urgent issue right now is safety. Locals are increasingly reluctant to use our town beach because of shark concerns, and that presents a real loss for our community. We know bull sharks are present in the river, and we accept that we share a healthy river system with marine life, but we can also take practical steps to make it safer. In early 2024, I gathered information from Global Marine Enclosures, who also installed Bicton Bars enclosure. This included bathymetry and geomorphology measurements and an installation quote. The much needed enclosure could remain in place year-round, reducing maintenance costs. It would use hemispherical anchors to avoid damaging the riverbed, and to reinforce a no boating area should be positioned along the existing no boating boundary, using well-researched design that does not harm marine animals. While the project would require a tender process, Global Marine Enclosures to date have recorded no bycatch and have provided preliminary cost estimates significantly lower than those noted by Stantec. Harvey Beach is well suited to this installation. It offers shallow water for wading, deeper areas for stronger swimmers, is sheltered by prevailing winds, and is suitable for all ages. Compared with other locations, it is more cost effective, poses no discernible risk to aquatic habitats or migrating marine life. Currently, similar installations heavily favour the southern suburbs. Harvey Beach aligns strongly with the state government's commitment to partner with the local councils to deliver shark mitigating strategies. Installation funding is likely to be fully covered by the state government, with newer projects operating with lower than forecasted maintenance costs. Given this, I ask, why has council not treated this as an urgent issue for our community? I refer to Stantec's letter to council dated February 2024 and the council meeting minutes from the 27th of March and 24th of July 2024. Why hasn't consultation and installation been budgeted in the last 2 financial years? Why has this been removed from council's agenda? Why have multiple pieces of correspondence gone unanswered by officers? Why has this not progressed to consultation and action, and when will it finally happen? Our community cannot wait another 2 years for action. Lives, safety and community wellbeing are at stake. The question is, will council act now or continue to wait? I would also like to take this time to thank our elected member Van Dawson for her strong support to date, and I look forward to the city's support immediately. Here is a list of people that are saying our council should be doing better. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Are we prepared to answer some of those questions? Thank you.
Thank you, through the chair. Yeah, we obviously are aware of the request for a shark enclosure or a safe swimming area. A preliminary assessment of Harvey Beach has been done, and we did include some consultancy funding provision in the 10-year financial plan. But you're right, it's not in the next 2 years, it's further back in the plan, and that's as a result of the current priorities that the council has. So happy to detail a fuller response in response to your questions, and we can raise it again as we go through the budget process.
Great. Were there any other members or folks in the public gallery that wanted to speak during public question time? No? Okay. Great. Then we'll move on with the agenda. Petitions. Are there any petitions? Seeing none. Deputations. Seeing none. Presentations. Seeing none. Okay. Confirmation of minutes. Can someone move and second the minutes from the council meeting on the 25th of February? Moved by Councillor Slaughter, seconded by Councillor Clark. All those in favor? Great. Unanimous. And elected member communication. Let me first just raise that there were questions raised by Councillor Williams and Wong at our last meeting during elected member communication, and the answers to those questions are in the additional documents that were published last night. So just wanted to flag that for folks. But do we have any elected member communication? Councillor Clark.
Yeah. Thank you. I just wanted to thank Lottery West for their $145,000. It's a lot of money coming to Fremantle for our International Street Arts Festival, our 10 Nights in Port, and our Wurundjeri Festival as well next year. So this is really important money that comes into the city to make good things happen for not only us, but everybody who comes to visit us and enjoy, especially the beloved Street Arts Festival that's coming soon in April. And thanks to our the city's team who applied for that grant, so that's really important money. And also I went to visit the studio school in Fremantle yesterday. They presented, they had a group of their students present all their innovative projects and they're going to focus on for the next semester, and that it was so impressive. There's so much talent and so much so many big brains in that school. It's just incredible. There was a whole pile of different subjects. It was really broad, everything from creating fashion labels, and one student who's already making crocheting bags, and she's starting her online Instagram business, through to some students are rebuilding four-wheel drives. That will sound familiar to some of our councillors, and an interest in electrical circuitry. So it was really broad. These are big brains. These are kids who are really planning, and it gives you great faith in the future and all those skills and brilliant knowledge that they'll apply to not only their interests but their future work. So it's great.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Slaughter?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd just like to comment on the invitation that Councillor Kamada and I took up to attend the Iftar annual community dinner at Nasir Mosque on Saturday, on the weekend. Their motto is love for all and hatred for none. And in this time of global unrest, it was really amazing to see so many community members there to support that. And alongside the Imam, we had Rabbi David Freilich, OAM, and Father Michael Twigg, and Mayor Logan Howlett of Coburn were all on the panel giving speeches about what connects us rather than what divides us. And it was a really special time, and it was great to be involved.
Thank you, Councillor Slaughter. Councillor Kamada.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Slaughter, for raising that. It truly was an inspirational event, and yeah, if the rest of the world, and our leaders, took a leaf out of the books of the people that spoke at that function, I think the world would certainly be a far safer place. I also wanted to speak about the Multicultural Cricket Festival that was held at Fremantle Oval on Labor Day, on the Labor Day weekend, on the Monday. It was a hastily organised event, and I'd like to thank the city, particularly Matt, Caitlin and the team, for the fantastic support that they gave to the organisers. It was through mainly the Indian consulate and other consulates that supported the Italian, the English and Croatian. And the Croatians put a hell of a lot into it. And the idea was to have these multicultural teams, so basically people of different ethnicity, their heritage, so Australians, but who are celebrating the backgrounds and the multiculturalism that makes this place such a fantastic place to live in. So 4 teams were put together. There was a temporary pitch laid out which did the job, and by all accounts it was a very well received event. The numbers were quite good during the short notice. The pavilion at South Fremantle had good numbers coming through. I know they did quite well over the bar. And it was also attended by Councillor Graham and the Mayor, so I thank you for your support. It was something that can be built on. There's already talk of other teams coming into the competition next year, and it was played in a really good spirit. So it's an event that I think that can be built on, and I'm just really grateful for the support from the city. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Councillor Kamada. And also, just echo your comments about the tournament, thanking the staff and also yourself for being captain of the Italian team. They did present us with a certificate, the Consulate of India, to thank us for all the support that the city provided to make the tournament happen, and it was really a really special day. And while I'm thanking Councillor Kamada, I also want to just, extend the thanks for representing the city tomorrow at a talk with the Superintendent Dean Snashall and with other folks in the community, in the business community. I really appreciate you stepping up to do that. So, is there any other elected member communication? No? All right, well, seeing none, so I have people to speak on 4 items, items 1, 2, 3, and 10. So we'll just take those items in that order. And so we'll start with item 1. And I have Sam Fisher listed to speak. Great, and you'll have 3 minutes when the timer goes off. We just ask that you try to wrap things up quickly. Thank you, Sam.
Evening to the City, Mayor and elected members. My name is Sam Fisher and I thank you for the opportunity to appear before you all once again. I'd like to briefly address the progress made since the deferral requested by Council on the 24th of September and the design response that has since followed. From the exact day after our deferral, we have undertaken a series of workshops and design sessions with the City's Planning Department to ensure your concerns were addressed in a practical and considered way. In essence, the concerns originally can be summarised as follows. The removal of the upper floor veranda placed much greater emphasis on the quality and treatment of the street facades. In this area, traditional commercial buildings are defined by articulation and architectural detail. In addition to this, the use of infill elements rather than brick arches reduced the detail and character that had contributed to the strength of the original facade response. So in our response, we've focused on 4 key design elements. First, the brick tone colour has been revised to a more industrial tone that better aligns with the neighbouring built form. Second, the window fenestration has been redesigned with curvature and thicker masonry to restore depth and articulation. Thirdly, the roof balustrade has moved from a glass treatment to blackened steel, creating a more resolved architectural form. And then finally, the datum line at ground level has been strengthened to provide clarity, articulation, and material definition. So since then, whilst we've still not received support from the Heritage Department, we respectfully consider this revised design should be assessed on its own merits. We note that some of the feedback and criticisms of the new design are in fact a contradiction to previous direction, and as such, we seek your direction to close out this matter with objectivity. We acknowledge this is an imperative gateway site, and we believe the amended design now delivers a stronger and more contextual outcome following Council's specific guidance. We've miraculously retained our full design team and delivery team through this extended process, and with the project now being shovel-ready, we're seeking your support to continue. With a significant increased investment to these late changes aforementioned, plus the ongoing holding costs for the past 6 months, we still remain committed and hope you are the same as well. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So any questions of the applicant or? No? Okay. We've got the item. We also have a proposed alternate motion. Did someone want to move? Councillor Williams and Wong?
Would like to move the officer's recommendation.
Is there a
Please.
seconder for the officer's recommendation? Councillor Slaughter.
Thank you. Look, I appreciate that there has been, changes since the last time this has come before us, but I'm still supportive of the officer's recommendation to refuse the current design. I do agree with Sam that this is a vital site in the heart of Fremantle within our heritage area, and new buildings of this scale will come along, every 30 or 50 years, which means that we're not going to get a second chance to get this building right. And what we approve tonight is going to stand there for a long time, and I don't think that the current design responds appropriately to its context. To begin with, it has kind of transformed from something that fit well with the context of the site, having 2 verandas and the kind of finishes that it did, to being a very industrial looking building, which I do not think suits the site or the context. And the amendments before us are minor tweaks from the last time that the design came before us, but not from the original proposal, which is still approved. The removal of the veranda and the balcony, the substitution of quality materials for lower grade alternatives, and the reduced window and door openings by almost half a metre, the loss of brickwork detail and the lack of landscape outcomes, as well as the clunky interface with Essex Street and the laneway behind. Each of these are important, and it's the cumulative impact of these changes that make it an unacceptable design outcome for this site, in my opinion. I think it's important when we think about the fact that the design has changed to consider it cumulatively, and also in how we each experience buildings. I mean, yes, they might appear minor on paper, but when we walk into a building and the windows and the doors are half a metre lower than was previously, it's something that we subconsciously consider, and good design makes us want to come back to places. Good design is also incredibly important if we want new development in Fremantle, that it responds well to our heritage. And the officers have described this as a building that now has an industrial appearance within a heritage context. The facade is still flat, and while there are arches over some of the windows, it doesn't create meaningful connection to either of the streetscapes. Last time the applicant came before us with the design, there was a lot of talk about costs in the debate, and I just wanted to address that in this opening to be very clear that while it is unfortunate for everyone that construction costs are going up, it is absolutely not a valid planning consideration for us to be thinking about in this debate. We as a council also face increased construction costs, and we're not expecting that someone else is going to approve a lesser heritage outcome because of that. So allowing cost to drive down design quality just doesn't sit well. And I think it would create a concerning, expectation going forward as construction costs continue to rise, that this is something that the City of Fremantle is happy to kind of let go. We know that heritage is central to what makes Fremantle a place people want to visit. We also know that that site has sat vacant and not very attractive for many years, but we only have one shot at getting a good building there, and I do not think that this design currently stands up to the standard that we need it to. So as we look to encourage more development in our city, we have to hold the line on design quality so that when people come to Fremantle, they recognise its heritage significance and it's a place that they want to return to. I know that some of the other councillors will challenge me on my, support for this officer's recommendation, so I look forward to that coming through the debate. But I encourage that all elected members to make sure that the considerations we give to this item are valid planning considerations and within what we have power to consider as a decision-making authority rather than, general concerns.
Thank you, Councillor Williamson-Wong. Any further comments on the officer's recommendation? Councillor Van Dorsen?
Yes, thank you. As you're aware, I have got an alternative recommendation up that I could move if the officer's recommendation doesn't get supported. And thank you, Councillor Williamson-Wong. Appreciate your comments, but I strongly disagree. So in my view, this application did come to council last year, and I was on the fence on it, and I do think we deserved a better design outcome, and I'm really supportive of what's being proposed tonight. I think you've addressed all the reasons for the deferral, certainly the concerns I had, and we've got a much better design outcome, which is, I'm grateful for the sort of opportunity that we give applicants to go back and have another look and have another shot, because it was just a little bit short last time, and I think it's a great outcome. And I think in my view, with the recommendations and also from officers tonight and the sort of reasons for refusal is, I feel like we're very wedded to the original proposal with a balcony. Seems to be was sort of suggested as a big reason for the original approval, but I don't think it's right to be comparing this to that. Our job tonight is to consider the current proposal on its merits, and that's what we're looking at. It's not to compare what was before and decided, it's looking at what we've got tonight. And I think the key planning considerations when you look at this, it's actually fitting into its context, impacts on amenity, contribution to streetscape design, of course, and the land use, of course. What we've got here is a largely compliant development. There's no over height or overshadow or any impacts on neighbours or anything really to consider. In terms of context, I think it fits really well into the context. I think it reflects Fremantle character with the materials and the design. And when you look at it next to what was approved next door at 33 South Street, I think it fits perfectly in its context when you look at them side by side and you can see design elements drawn from that. And my concern is with planning applications, I recall when that 33 South Terrace was approved by the DAP, which was a pod hotel, and I supported that. But all the conversation around that application was focused on the overheight, the impacts, as a mixed use or residential in nature. So looking at, the size of the rooms and the services, the traffic impacts on the laneway and all these sort of things, which are a very, very important consideration, the impact of the development, but we weren't focused on the sort of the finer detail of design. I just feel like we're holding this application to a higher standard, and if there were more variations proposed, such as overheight and all that sort of thing, then we sort of put more scrutiny to those things. But because it's compliant generally from a planning perspective, it's sort of this focus on the design. Anyway, I think it looks fantastic. It'll be a great improvement to that corner. I'd love to see that redeveloped and reactivated. The Hungry Jack's building is well overdue and is an absolute eyesore. And I think it's not our job to design buildings and say once in a 30-year opportunity. That's not our job. We cannot tell landowners what to build on their site and how to design it. Our job is just to assess what's brought before us. Anyway, I would hope that I'd ask everyone to support or not support the officer's recommendation and move to support, if given the opportunity, my alternative recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Van Dorsen. Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you. I don't strongly disagree with Councillor Williams and Wong's reasons for supporting the refusal, but I still disagree. I mean, clearly, councillors are aware that I had, suggested that there might be further improvements that can be made. But at the end of the day, we have to decide whether this gets an approval because it meets the threshold or it doesn't meet the threshold. So bear in mind that we deferred this application last time, and I think many in the room were saying it was line ball then. And if it was line ball then, and we've seen improvements made since then I would question those who supported the deferral last time, what additional things were required. If it was line ball and there have been improvements, and I don't think there's any contention about the fact that there have been improvements in the design, then the reality is it should be considered as one of those ones that is meeting the threshold, because those improvements have been reasonable, although not perfect in my mind, but reasonable in terms of meeting the issues that were identified in the deferral last time. I would like to, remind ourselves that site, and not just that site, but that site and the adjoining site, haven't had decent buildings on them for virtually as long as I can remember. And I'm talking about since I was about 4. So, it has been the real dead part of the Cappuccino Strip, or the real lack of quality part of the Cappuccino Strip for my entire lifetime. And in some ways, some people argue that that's its heritage, because that's all they can remember. Vacant, semi-vacant car yards and those sort of things. The other thing is that I know we all fell in love with the idea of a 2-storey veranda. But the applicant has said that that's not an affordable option as part of this business plan. Now, I know that that's not a planning consideration, but what is a planning consideration is sometimes incremental improvement is a fairly reasonable way to go. So in other words, if we're one step closer to a better outcome, or the best outcome even, then that's worth taking. And the reality is, if this development is successful, the applicant has said that they could come back and give consideration to building the upper level terrace. If it's a successful venture, that's what typically happens. And we've seen that with our heritage buildings. When they get well utilised, then they get more loved, and they get the verandas put back and all of those sort of things. The other thing is, there isn't necessarily a compelling argument that there should be a 2-storey veranda here. This notion that everywhere in the city had 2-storey verandas is not actually true. The buildings over the road have single-storey verandas. Some buildings have had 2-storey verandas at times and then single-storey verandas later on. The building, I think, where old Papa's used to be, I think had a single-storey veranda, but the old library where the dome was had a 2-storey one, which we restored. It doesn't mean that everything has to be a 2-storey veranda. I think we fell in love with the 2-storey veranda because we felt that the building behind was not of such quality that it would stand alone in its own right, but a veranda being a fairly easy structure to get right, and an activating structure would hide any imperfections or inadequacies in terms of our expectations for high quality design. But you know what? So will trees. And I'm a great believer that that whole strip needs a significant improvement in terms of canopy cover. I've been waiting for the veranda to go back on the old Papa's strip building for my entire lifetime as well. And it's unlikely to happen in my lifetime unless the property changes hands. So the reality is, you know, to improve that area, that's actually in our capability. We can improve that area tomorrow if we really want to. And we don't have to wait for the highest quality and most expensive buildings to get put back to actually do that. So I you know, it is an important site. It is an important area. But the Cappuccino Strip is not quite at the heritage level of the West End of Fremantle. And I think we just need to accept that a development like this is, as I said, an incremental improvement, and that we shouldn't expect the perfect. We should just assess it as being passing the threshold and let them get on with it, and hope that the building next door also happens, and put some bloody trees in the budget this year for planting next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. Councillor Slaughter?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I seconded Jemima's moving of this initial motion to refuse for most of the same reasons that she's already mentioned. But I do feel that I was coming at this with fresh eyes, not having been at the meeting where this was first talked about and deferred. So when I saw that the main reasons for refusal were because it's inconsistent with parts of our heritage policy and would have a negative impact on the heritage values, that's the main reason for the main focus of my vision on this project, was just really looking into the value of the site as a gateway place coming into town, especially with other developments along South Terrace as you come into the city from that side. And it will, whatever gets built on this site, whether it stays what it is now or gets changed to something else, it will be a dominant visual impact on the streetscape. And for those reasons, I agree with the officer's comments that it's inconsistent to be approved.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Slaughter. Councillor Moughlin.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't support the officer's recommendation, and on the flip side to Councillor Slaughter, and more aligned to that of Councillor Sullivan in talking about the report says it will have a negative impact on a place of cultural significance, but I think it's important for us to have a look along that part of South Terrace and to note the mix of buildings and different qualities and of different periods that exist there. So we do have this proposal and the site that it is on currently. So the old Hungry Jack's, the faux Federation type building that sits there, the Sailing for Oranges building next door, which I'm not in a position to be able to describe what that building is. And then we've got the, across the road, the Metropolis building, and then moving along to the Piazza and the like, and everything that goes with that. So I actually think the heritage of this area is that mix of development that has occurred. And essentially, and if Councillor Sullivan's, calculations are correct, and looking on this particular side of the road, we haven't had a new building contribute to this streetscape for 50 odd years or so. And on the other side, there most probably hasn't been anything meaningfully built in the last 40 or so years. And I think what we're seeing before us tonight actually, to the point, isn't necessarily the perfect architecturally designed building, but it is going to make a significant contribution to that part of Fremantle and the cultural significance of this part of Fremantle. As much as it is the buildings, it is the activity that occurs in that part of Fremantle. And this building is going to bring more activity. It's going to bring activation, and it's going to ensure that we have what we hope for, and that's a thriving main street in Fremantle. And this isn't the West End. It's a mixed area of heritage, and I'm supportive of the development that's before us tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Moughlin. Councillor Graham.
Councillor Moughlin's telling me to have a go, so I'll have a go. Look, I mean, this one is what, say 50-50, isn't it? We haven't created this dilemma. The applicants have created this dilemma. They have an approval going back to September 2023, which everyone raved about. You know, we thought this was fantastic. Why they did not take that up, they came back and said it was going to be too expensive. Well, if they had have started that in 2023 and finished it at the end of 2024, they would have paid it off by now. You only have to walk around Fremantle on a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday night to see how busy all these pubs, restaurants and bars and clubs are. So I had a crack at them when it came back in 25, was it, over the fact that they, you know, said it was all too expensive and too hard. Well, you know, this is why you got the problem tonight, Sam. You know, you should have just gone ahead and built what you were approved with. But anyway, notwithstanding that, we've been asked to have a look at it again. My eyes are looking at this as a fresh application, and I would have thought that as a fresh application and without all the background that we know, this would have come through as a refusal by the officers, and I think everyone would have mostly agreed with that. So that's how I'm sort of looking at this one. I don't think they've done enough to get it over the heritage threshold. Again, you know, this is saying, let's go ahead and approve it, you know, get it activated, as Councillor Moughlin says, get the building up and running. It's, you know, it meets just about everything. This one's saying, is it what we want on this corner? And we do need a significant building on this corner because it is a significant entry point coming south from South Terrace. And, you know, when you look at, you've got the Norfolk, the synagogue, the old TAFE, the church, you know, this is a little area that's pretty unique. And if you have visitors that come to Perth and Fremantle, you know, they just look at it in awe of how fantastic it is. So I think this corner does need something special. We did have that. We don't have that now. You know, I'm still sitting on the fence a bit, so I think this hand might go up a bit more than this one, so we'll wait and see, eh?
Thank you, Councillor Graham. Councillor Clark.
Thanks. This is obviously a highly contentious location in Fremantle. There's a lot of attachment to this location. There's a lot of frustration with this location. And I was not on council for the previous round of design, which had me asking a few questions. So that's great. I mean, we talk about heritage values, and heritage is very close to my heart in Fremantle. It's what makes us so incredibly special architecturally and as a city. But also I completely agree with Councillor Sullivan that we can also green up a street if we want to this year. This building, we talk about heritage, but when you put the building that is proposed tonight with the red brick, with those industrial style windows next to what is proposed to be built right next door to it at Sailing for Oranges, not only does this proposed building reflect the warehouses that are only a 5-minute walk away down the road in our West End through its squared off windows. Those squared off windows also reflect what's sitting in a very contemporary building that we have not imposed heritage on right next door. So this is the gateway to the city. Thank God there weren't too many 80s and 90s buildings that went up. With all respect to our architects, it was not a great time architecturally. So we've now got a situation where we do have that mashup, as Councillor Moughlin said, of buildings. I feel this is that incremental step that will step us up significantly from the car yard that used to be there, was it that eons ago? And of course, Hungry Jack's that's been there since the beginning of time, and that faux look. This has more integrity design-wise, and it sits next to a very different building, but it also complements it. And we will never get the heritage that's been destroyed back, but I think this is a great nod to it. And I thank you for the design, and I thank you, Sam, also for listening and changing the colour of the bricks, because it does really improve that building. I get that we missed the second storey, but I don't have any issues with this building. I'd love to see this developed.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. And in keeping with the kind of semi-tradition of speaking if you vote against an officer's recommendation, I was really line ball on this one up and even during the debate. And I think I've fallen over on the side with Councillors Sullivan and Clark and Van Dorsen and Moughlin. This is an important site, but I think it's the improvements that have been made are just enough. I think the applicant knows that none of us are really enthusiastic about the design, but given that we can do things as a council in the public realm to help either hide it with trees or do other things. And so I think for me, after hearing everyone speak, I think I've fallen on the side of not voting in favor of the officer's recommendation, and I'm hopeful that we can get to Van Dorsen's alternate recommendation. Any other speakers on the item?
Yeah, I better say something. If we have to hide it with trees, I think there's a problem to start
Exactly.
with. Yeah, look, it's something I'd love to see go ahead. I enthusiastically voted for the first design that came up. We talk about balance and threshold, and when I go through it, we talk about the balcony being removed, but there's a whole list underneath that of other factors that are against voting for this particular item as it stands. I'd just love to see, it's a great entry point, an important entry point for Freo, and yeah, on the balance, I just can't quite get across the line. So yeah, I'll be supporting the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Kamara. I think that's everyone, so we'll go back to Councillor Williamson-Wong to close.
Thanks. Look, I'm going to try and convince some of you to change your minds, but it doesn't sound like I'm going to be successful. I'm going to give it a red hot anyway. I agree wholeheartedly with Councillor Kamara that if we are relying on our public works to hide buildings, then we should not be approving that building. I would also argue that it's not a valid planning consideration for us to approve things on the basis that we're just going to hide them from the public using our works. And on top of that, the applicant has shown that they are not willing to engage with our staff to discuss landscaping and the streetscape, which is in the report, and whether or not that will change because we approve it tonight or not. I do think it's important for us to consider that the applicant has been asked to consider landscape outcomes and to create a design that interacts with our streetscape, and they haven't, and they've had that opportunity from the get-go. I also think, as Councillor Sullivan said, the veranda, which we loved, which I wasn't on council to approve or, have a discussion about at the time, hid the design which we believed was inadequate to our threshold. Again, if it's inadequate to our threshold without the veranda, then it should still be inadequate without the veranda. Now, regardless of whether or not we, loved it or who was at the table when that got approved. And I also think that, I agree with Councillor Moughlin, it is a mixed character area, but that doesn't mean that we should have a huge industrial building that doesn't interact with our streetscape at all. And I think the interaction with the streetscape is fundamental to the character of that area, because some places have verandas, but they also have, even Sailing for Oranges site, which we all know has been, an interesting site for proponents to work on. There is they try and interact with the streetscape through landscaping, and many of them have alfresco dining. This does, say that they want to have alfresco dining, and they propose that. But it is also a corner block, and it only interacts with one side minimally. It doesn't interact with our laneway, which I thought would have upset Councillor Sullivan, given his love for us to access these spaces in our city. And also, I agree with Councillor Graham. If this was us looking at it for the first time, we wouldn't have approved it. We would have sided with our officers to say that this does not meet the threshold and trusted them on that, rather than thinking that the incremental improvements along the way somehow get us just over the line. I mean, if we're not enthusiastic about designs in vital sites of our city, then I don't think we actually believe that they meet our threshold for good design. And we shouldn't be here designing buildings for applicants. That's not our role. But our role is to uphold the standards of which our buildings meet. And, you know, it is not just that there's a balcony missing, as Councillor Kamada said. It is the list of things and, unfortunately, the lower grade alternatives that this applicant has had to use because of cost reasons. And I acknowledge that it is completely frustrating and, you know, a terrible point to be at as an applicant, to think, well, we can't deliver on the building that we wanted because we don't have the money. But unfortunately, that is not for us to consider. And if there was a design originally coming to us with the materials proposed and the design proposed, I don't think we would approve it. And so will be supporting the officer's recommendation tonight.
Okay, so just to be clear, when voting on this item, voting in favor of the item means voting to refuse, and voting against means you're voting to move on to the other potential. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so all those in favor of the officer's recommendation: Councillor Williamson-Wong, Councillor Slaughter, Councillor Graham, Councillor Kamada. All those against: Councillor Moughlin, Councillor Van Dorsen, Councillor Clark, Councillor Sullivan, and Lawver. 5-4, we have not accepted that. So if anyone would want to move the alternate, Councillor Van Dorsen, seconded by Councillor Clark.
Thank you. I have already spoken to this in the previous motion, so I think I can leave it at that. Thank you.
Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you. And look, this is a very important site, as everybody has admitted and spoken to. And we do need, obviously, to get these sites right, but we also need to get them moving. I think one of the most compelling things that was said was what Councillor Moughlin said, which is about the heritage of the Cappuccino Strip is essentially as much in the way in which that place has been used over our lifetimes as it is in the bricks and mortar. And that should be an equal consideration. So getting functionality back into that area, in an area that hasn't had great functionality for a considerable time, is a really important opportunity. So everything everything in heritage doesn't have to be about bricks and mortar. Sometimes it's about getting functions. So the other thing is, it's a very small site in the context of trying to build a building in that area. And if it had been part of a bigger site, I think we might have been able to see more investment in the overall design of an area. If it had been part of the adjoining site, we probably would have been looking at, a 3-storey building with a 4-storey setback, and we'd be sort of all worried about it being overdevelopment and too big, and can we scale it back and the like. But the reality is, this one isn't pushing any big planning boundaries. And so there isn't necessarily an expectation that we have when we're looking at, say, the adjoining building, where we get right down to saying, well, I think you're going to need to have the design quality over and above the threshold because you're asking for all these concessions. That's not the case here. In fact, the opposite is true. It's modest in height. And I didn't, maybe I gave the wrong impression to some of my colleagues, But the notion of using trees, in my view, helps add to and create an environment. It does help soften buildings that perhaps aren't, the highest of quality. But I'd like to see the trees go in front of the buildings that are next door as well, because they don't have verandas. I'd like to see the trees go back in there for the very thing that I was talking about before, the functionality of the space. And the combination of trees and an active use of what has been a dead site for a long period of time does, in my book, actually recontribute to the heritage character of the area. So I do urge you to now approve this, but I also urge you to look at the Cappuccino Strip and look at Essex Street and see what we can do to do our bit in investing in that area where we know that we have at least 2 owners, probably 3, ready to go and invest in that area. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. Any further comment on the item? No, seeing none, did you wish to close? Councillor Van Dorsen? All right, we'll put the alternate motion for approval up for a vote. All those in favour? Councillor Graham, Councillor Moughlin, Councillor Van Dorsen, Councillor Clark, Councillor Sullivan, and Lawver. All those against? Councillor Slaughter, Councillor Kamada, and Councillor Williamson-Wong. That is approved. So we've got your approval tonight. The staff will be in touch about what that means, but congratulations. All right, next we have 2 speakers on item 2, which is Atfield Street. I have Ian Longley. Great, thank you, Ian. At about 3 minutes, you'll hear a chime. So if you haven't finished your comments, we just ask that you try to wrap it up as quickly as you can at that point. Thank you.
I'll take about 30 seconds, so it's not a problem. First of all, I'd like to say that the Hungry Jack's site has great cultural significance for me. In 1983, I used to go there, I think, before the America's Cup, so it's been very interesting watching the debate. I realise it's a horrible building and it should go, but that's a different issue. So, I'm the owner of 52 Atfield with my wife. She sends her apologies and thanks for your time tonight to consider this proposal. We just wanted to say thank you to the Heritage Department in the council over the last 6 months or so, where we've been working with them to come up with a constructive solution. And I realise these things are always complicated. You know, as a layperson on these issues, it's always a bit hard to understand, but the interaction has been good. And I think hopefully you'll see that there's been a compromise on both sides. And I just wanted to say thanks for that process. It's been a learning experience for us, but I think we've hopefully got there in the end. So hopefully you'll approve the thing today. But thank you all for your time. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. Next, I have Glenn to speak on the same item.
Sorry, I might have slightly misunderstood the process tonight. I've already put in a written application with my concerns about the proposal, which I hope will be incorporated into your decision making. I only registered to speak in case there was some last minute change or some, left field proposal that wasn't actually in the proposal tonight. So in the absence of that, assuming that nothing else is being raised that would be disadvantageous to me, I don't really have anything to add to what I've already written previously. So apologies again for your time.
Oh, no worries. No, you're always welcome to come and speak. But we do have, in addition to the officer's recommendation of refusal, we do have an alternate motion to approve and a proposed deferral motion. So this can go any way. So hold on to your seat. I'll just ask someone to move one of the options before us. Councillor Slaughter, move the officer's recommendation. Okay. Seconded by Councillor Moughlin.
Thank you. I feel like rehashing a few things here, but again, I agree with the officer's recommendation based on the heritage policy that what has been put forward on this item is not consistent with our standards and should be refused.
Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you. As councillors know, I have a deferral motion, and the reason I put that in is I do have some reservations, but I'm certainly not at a point where I support a outright refusal. The reasons are, while I look at this cottage, I don't see it as a cottage, I actually see it as a fairly significant house, and I would probably have classified it a level 2 listing rather than a level 3 listing, but that's where it's at level 3, and essentially the heritage staff have assessed it on that basis as well. They would have had an opportunity to go, this is line ball level 2 probably, and potentially could have given us a report based on that. So I, for me, I intuitively think of it somewhere a little bit significantly more important than just the standard cottage that we see in Fremantle. The flip side of that is its significant setback. And of course, so its contribution to the streetscape is not as profound as a building that's much closer to the street. But there are a number of buildings in this locale that are set significantly further back, and that is an important part of it. And some very impressive older houses, bigger houses, bigger duplex in that area. So it is an interesting one. But as a level 3 cottage, we would often see very little change at the front and potentially significant change at the back. And I think even the wing that extends out the back, I mean, I certainly would have seen quite a few of those sorts of wings pulled off so that a addition could be fitted into the site. So the fact that we are seeing some demolition, and the fact that the existing roofscape has now been kept, I think is a fairly significant change. If on the other hand it was going to get to a point of approval, which I hope that's where we're heading, then obviously I had some reservations about the extent of changes to the front of the building, both internally and externally. And that comes from, I guess, my more normal reading of what we should be doing for a level 3 building, what we should be keeping, and that, each layer as you go back in the house can be a little bit less critical, depending on the of the importance of the building. But because of that, I don't for the life of me understand why in the most important front room that one would be taking the old chimneys out, the old fireplace out. I don't understand why we would allow, even at a normal level 3, the removal of the wall in the hallway to create what is, I guess, a folly in a sense, a nook that completely destroys the character of the other front room. So that's what my deferral motion was really about, was basically saying, I think the applicant's done enough in changing the application at the back of the property to win my support, but there is a little bit more that needs to be done at the front. But I won't be supporting the refusal. I think that's a step too far.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. Councillor Van Dorsen.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, similarly to Councillor Sullivan, I won't be supporting the refusal and leaning towards either approval tonight. I did put up an alternative recommendation just so that we had that option to consider, because we can't move it on the night, and would be leaning towards a deferral if we can't quite get that extra mile. In my view, as a category 3, I think it does need to be assessed on that basis, and I do thank the applicant for the improvements they've made and working with the heritage officers and our planning officers on this. I think, overall I have no great objection to what's being proposed. I guess personally, I'm more concerned about exterior heritage and as it's viewed from the street, and and its contribution to the public realm, as well as obviously conservation and of important heritage buildings. But yeah, I was a little surprised as a Category 3 that we get down to sort of this level of debating whether we're removing an internal fireplace, which is a private space, and yeah, it's sort of up to people living there how they want to design that space and how they want it used and to look and everything. And I also, just with this one, I guess the reason I was almost, would be reasonably comfortable approving this is I grew up in a house like this and it doesn't have any fireplaces. And so I was only seeing this application, I'm like, oh, yes, it probably had fireplaces once upon a time, and actually there was a neighbouring house, it's almost a twin house, and they had fireplaces. It made me reflect, well, the houses have been there, they're very, very old, 100 years or something, and someone could have removed those fireplaces in that time, and we wouldn't be looking at it in the same way. But yeah, anyway, just a personal view, I actually prefer the house I grew up with without the fireplaces, the way it felt, looked. It gives you a more flexible use of space, and appreciate you'd be removing the fireplace from the front rooms as bedrooms. If that was a lounge room, I would want the fireplaces retained, to be honest, because I think it's a personal view. But yeah, I won't be supporting the refusal, and yeah, we'll see how the discussion goes. Thank you.
No, we're in debate. But thank you. Thank you, Councillor Van Dorsen. Councillor Williamson-Wong?
Thank you. I echo Councillor Sullivan's view. I think I am leaning towards a deferral on this item for those reasons. I do think as a level 3 that it is appropriate for us to consider the, I guess, internal fit outs of these houses, because that is part of, the heritage listing and feel. And I do think that the fireplaces and also that internal hallway are important parts of these heritage houses. Heritage should also be about, how houses feel, and I appreciate that Councillor Van Dorsen, preferred her house without fireplaces, but the fact that there would have been fireplaces in there means that they, the reason that it's heritage is because they were all there originally. So regardless of if it's a bedroom or living room, that is, a plan can say one thing and then the person can decide to have a bedroom there or a living room. It shouldn't matter what the room is being used for. I would be supportive of the applicant keeping that fireplace and making sure that the hallway is consistent. But yeah, echo much of what Councillor Sullivan has said and put forward in the deferral if we get there.
Thank you, Councillor Williamson-Wong. Councillor Kamada?
Yeah, thank you. I'd just like to, I suppose, express my support for what's already been said by my fellow colleagues. Thank the applicant for coming in, and it's great to hear that you're working positively with the officers. It sounds like it's all heading in the right direction. I certainly wouldn't want to outright refuse this myself. I'm probably leaning a bit towards a deferral if we get to that point, because I feel that if you can retain the heritage features of the house and still achieve your objectives, I think that it would be a great result. So yeah, that's where I'm sitting at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Graham.
Yeah, look, just briefly, I'm with Councillor Sullivan and the others on this one. Deferral would do the trick for me. I wouldn't be supporting the refusal or the approval tonight. So,
and I'll just say, because I probably also would not be supporting an outright refusal this evening for much of the same reasons that have already been said. And my personal preference would be that we could get to a deferral to allow some more time to get this one over the line. Hold on one second, because the deferral would be a procedural motion that we can't move until it can be moved whenever, but if we have a vote on this, then we have to vote it up or down. So,
ask a question. If we don't support the officer's refusal, does that close the door on refusals into the future? In which case, it would be smarter to move the deferral before the refusal.
This sounds like a definite possibility.
Through the chair, Councillor Sullivan references the fact that we can't make a fresh decision within 3 months of making an original decision if it's been proposed and voted down. At this stage, I would say if we were intending not to vote for the refusal, that someone move the deferral or or one of the other options, rather than vote on this item in particular.
I think based on what I've heard, I will move my deferral motion.
Is there someone to second that? Councillor Van Dorsen? Now, there's no real debate on a procedural motion, but he can speak to it, obviously, if you wish.
Yeah, look, I thought tonight we would probably do the refusal and approval and then fall back to a deferral. Or in fact, I thought we would look at the approval first, and if that didn't get up, look at the deferral, and if that didn't get up, obviously we go to a refusal. So sometimes we get ourselves caught up in a little bit of the wrong sequence. So I apologise for that. But I think on the basis of what I have heard from my colleagues already, it does seem that the majority are keen to look towards an approval, but still have a few matters that they feel need to be looked at. A deferral is also in one where we have concerns that have been raised by neighbours. I think is not a bad outcome, just procedurally anyway, because it does allow people that perhaps were unaware that we could jump from a refusal to an approval in the one meeting. It does give them an opportunity to have their say at council if they choose to. The deferral items are fairly minor in nature at the front of the house, and given that that's all it refers to, there is, I think, a tacit, if you support it, there is a tacit sort of understanding that you're basically agreeing to all of the things that are at the rear that haven't necessarily been picked up in the deferral motion. So it's giving the applicant a fairly, clear green signal that the majority of what they're proposing is going to be acceptable to the council. So on that basis, I'd ask you to support it.
Did the seconder wish to speak to the deferral?
Just a question. Do we need to make clear in the deferral decision reasons for it and then give the applicant some guidance on what we would expect to be addressed before it comes back?
There are reasons contained in the deferral motion there. If you wish to add something, it would have to be with agreement of the mover.
Okay, apologies, I wasn't looking at the
probably
screen.
minor in nature.
No, that's fine. That was just a question. I would support the deferral for those reasons. Thank you.
Do you have a question, Councillor Williamson-Wong?
Yes,
Okay.
two, a procedural one and one for Councillor Sullivan, if I can. Procedurally, when we vote for deferrals and they have reasons in them, is there a kind of, it's my understanding that the next time we look at an application, if it meets exactly why we deferred it, you're not necessarily having to approve it. So can you confirm whether that's true? If this application comes back with the retention, restoration, all of these points, would we all be forced to approve it?
Through the chair, no, because you have then no is the answer. You'd then be considering the entire development application.
Thank you.
Did you have another question? Because that was one question.
No, I think I'm done now. Thanks.
Okay. All right, so we have a deferral procedural motion before us to defer this application. All of those in favor? And that is unanimous, so great. We have a deferral, so the staff will get in touch with you about what that means and work with you to hopefully resolve a few of these items. Great, thank you. We are now on item 3. Thank you, Phil, for being patient. Hickory Street.
All right, thank you. Good evening, Mayor and councillors and the Planning Department. Am I ready to go? Yep, okay. I would like to speak in support of the office's recommendation for conditional approval of the demolition at 20 Hickory Street, South Fremantle. I'm here on behalf of our clients and the owners of 20 Hickory, Danny and Matt Burke, and their children, who have lived on the property for many years before deciding to embark on a redesign project. They did so initially on the understanding that the existing dwelling had been delisted following review by council in March 2024. However, in August of the next year, the property was included as a contributory place in the South Fremantle Heritage Area, insofar as it sits within a streetscape that has heritage value. The officer notes that it was not subjected to an individual assessment, rather owners were given the opportunity to question the listing if they disagreed. Our clients at the time mistakenly assumed the high-level delisting only the year prior exempted their property from the more recent street-wide recognition. Unfortunately, as we began to dig further for them, this appeared not to be the case, and hence we are here before you tonight. As the officer outlines, it is essentially for the same reasons that led to the delisting in 2024 that we have requested the property be removed as a contributory place. These are covered in detail in the officer's assessment, so I won't go into them. So I just wanted to add some contextual information. Our clients fell in love with the area and the local community when they moved here over 10 years ago, and they've become well established within it. Their strong desire is to create a long-term home on this property, which can adapt over time to suit their evolving needs. They are known in the street for their open door policy, and they want to create an even more welcoming home for their own family and for those to drop in. Over the years, they've adapted the existing home since 2014 to better achieve these goals. However, they've come to the realisation in the last year that the internal configuration, the conglomeration of additions over the years, and the general position of the house on the subdivided lot have been hindering the outcome. So their hope is to create a new dwelling, a sensitively designed dwelling that's site and climate responsive on the street they've come to love, which will allow them to stay within this community and give them no reason to ever leave. So their request to demolish the existing residence is made in the context of this desire and this intention. Thanks very much.
Great, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for? No? All right. If we can get someone to move the officer's recommendation to approve demolition. Councillor Kamada, seconded by Councillor Graham. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll put that up to a vote. All those in favor? That's unanimous. Good work. And now we're going to skip ahead, everybody, because Phil is also here for item 10, which is Lefroy. It's the laneway, Lefroy Road. And I'll just note that we do have a proposed deferral motion as well for this item. Did you wish to speak about the? Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, I was actually planning to go after Dave, but so I agree with what Dave has said. I would just like to reiterate a few things. Firstly, that we are on this road because our initial efforts to bring together a number of adjoining owners to fund our own maintenance of the laneway sadly failed. People didn't want to contribute or be held liable. So we therefore embarked on this dedication process, knowing that we were very unlikely to be successful. However, our hope all along was that by entering into a discussion with the city and bringing the situation to your attention, we could embark on a constructive process where a reasonable and fair outcome would eventually prevail. So this is still our hope, and that is why we're here tonight, to plead, I guess, with you to keep this discussion open and not to simply dismiss it by voting in favour of the officer's recommendation. We feel the prescribed dedication process was set up in a way for failure from the start, in particular because of the very high cost that was put against the restoration of the laneway to a standard that the city would require to assume ownership, around $160,000. We feel that a safe and equitable laneway can be achieved for far less than this. However, we haven't been invited into the discussions, I guess. We also feel that there are various degrees or potential middle points in many aspects of the discussion, which could be brought to the surface and investigated through an open, workshop involving us as the current owners. One such alternative was uploaded last night as an alternative motion, which will be tabled later. We also believe there are other alternatives worth discussing. We ultimately want this community asset to thrive. However, as the only two owners, we have real limitations as to what we can achieve in terms of cost and liability. We really need the city to partner with us to achieve the goal. And this is, in that way, it's really far from a private matter. We've spoken to countless members of the community who consider this laneway as a part of the wider network of laneways, an indispensable part of their daily routine and enjoyment of South Fremantle. We have the support of the community. We're now just asking for your support as the city. The 5 options presented in the officer's assessment are not the only options. We request that a consideration of this item be deferred and that we be invited into the room to have discussions with the city about achieving a constructive and fair outcome. We don't believe that it's balanced for just 2 owners out of 16 adjoining properties and countless members of the benefiting community to be asked to maintain this community asset single-handedly, simply because many decades ago, some planning anomaly led to the laneway being tacked onto our green titles. We hope you agree, will agree, and we'll keep this conversation open and hopefully invite us in. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Did you wish to speak to the item? If you could just give, say your name for the record. Thank you.
I iterate Phil's comments. I'm David Barr. So thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight on the Lefroy Road laneway. So it is worth noting that the laneway has provided connection between Lefroy Road and Jenkins Street for more than 100 years, since the subdivision of 1902. Over that time, it has had fractured ownership, but has continued to function as a local laneway serving surrounding properties and providing pedestrian links through the neighbourhood. Laneways are different from streets and roads. They are small, pedestrian-friendly spaces that often become part of the social fabric of the neighbourhood. They are places where children play cricket, netball, neighbours meet, dogs are walked, and where social community events happen, such as the laneway Christmas party. And in South Fremantle, particularly, the laneways form an important network connecting streets and parks. Today, this laneway still functions in that way, but legally remains private land that reflects a legacy from the early subdivision when a simple dirt track was sufficient. It was sufficient, and the long-term implications were not fully considered. Over the past 15 years, the properties that rely on this laneway for access have contributed significant rates to the city. Based on recent figures, the properties, so 21A Lefroy Road, 21B Lefroy Road, and the laneway 19F, alone have contributed $100,000 in rates over 15 years, with a broader group of other properties probably exceeding $200,000 over the 15-year period. Those contributions are only possible because the laneway permits the increased density. For this increased density, the city has not contributed to the upkeep of the laneway, but benefits from the increased rates. As 2 individual households, we're not in a position to maintain what effectively functions as public infrastructure. For that reason, I encourage the council to consider option 5, which is a fully dedicated laneway, listed by the officers, or the additional motion listed by Councillor Andrew Sullivan, which requires the deferral, which will then also require additional guidance as to how we can contribute an alternative way for the laneway to proceed without our ownership. And there's many other councils that actually have ownership of laneways: Subiaco, Vincent, Stirling, and Victoria Park. And they have alternate ways that people contribute through large alterations and additions, or new houses where there's a particular fund that gets contributed to the laneway. Ultimately, this is about ensuring that the existing connection between Lefroy Road and Jenkins Street is retained and secured long-term by the city, rather than remaining an uncertain piece of private ownership. Thank you.
Great, thank you, David. Okay, any questions? And just noting that we do have a proposed deferral motion as well on this one. See no questions, I'll ask for someone to move the officer's recommendation. Well, Councillor Moughlin, seconded by Councillor Williamson Wong.
Thanks. Yeah, I suppose very briefly, I support the officer's recommendation. The threshold, whilst I agree it's difficult to achieve, the feedback that was received from community members was so far below that I can't countenance, giving that leeway as part of, looking to approve in this instance. And I think it is pretty reasonable. The city does have ways which are in private ownership across the city. And if we are taking ownership of those, then they need to be at a reasonable standard. It would be a significant cost across the city for us to take on all those laneways, and we need a reasonable process, and I think this is one that achieves that.
Thank you, Councillor Moughlin. Councillor Williamson Wong.
Thank you. Look, I agree with Councillor Moughlin's comments. I think also for me, it lands with two things. One is that our policy exists because we know that it's an issue, that we have there are many unique situations where we have laneways that are used as pedestrian accesses but in private ownership, and this policy was created to, I guess, try and come up with a way for us to fairly and equitably deal with that, and whether or not we're to a point where the city might take control, and we haven't been able to meet that in this situation. But I also understand that it's a high threshold to get 15, 20 houses to say that they want to commit extra money, which they probably think that they have absolutely no need to pay for a kind of shared asset. So I do think that Councillor Sullivan's proposed deferral motion goes to, talks about some ideal solutions and approaches that might be considered. But I personally don't think that as a city we should be bearing the costs of investigating those solutions. And I also say that because the laneway itself is in private ownership. When anyone buys a piece of land, regardless of it's a laneway or not, they are taking on the responsibility for the costs and the maintenance, and it's unfair that this is the situation. And I do think that there are many other middle options that might be considered here, but I do think that it will be a solution that requires a planner and probably a lawyer to figure out the titles and the subdivisions and all of those things, and to ask for the city to, handle that goes against our policy in some ways, because it's, putting extra pressure on our city services for, as Councillor Moughlin says, there are many laneways. We know Councillor Graham has, one in his area that comes up, and I encourage people to look at other options for how we might deal with these and subdivide them and figure out the access ways. But that, in the end, unfortunately, if it doesn't meet the policy, that it is an issue for private, consideration. And if there was an approach, as Councillor Sullivan says, where it's possible to close the kind of dog leg off and subdivide that, and for there to be kind of halfway midpoint, maybe that's a conversation that the city then enters again to say, is there a cost-effective approach that makes sense for us? But that's not what we're looking at now, and I also don't think it's something that our staff should be tasked with going to find the solutions to.
Thank you, Councillor Williamson Wong. Councillor Sullivan.
Yeah, thank you. This has been a bugbear of mine, the laneway issues, for a very long time, and I've sort of gone along with the city's perspective and the policies that we've got in place, but with a lot of reservation, because I see other local governments pretty well everywhere doing something quite different over the decades and doing works to laneways, taking them on, accepting that there was an anomaly in the way planning was done in the past, and that the sort of dead owners or the church that owns the laneway or the estate that's been held by some other agency are really not it's an unrealistic expectation that they are going to be responsible for those spaces. I've heard a lot of people talk about, well, they own the land, it's their responsibility, and then in the same breath talk about what an unfair burden it is for those individuals. So it's either one or the other. I don't think it can actually be both. And I think it is an unfair burden when two people are responsible for a laneway that 15, 16 different households take access of. The thing that really worries me about this one is that unlike some laneways, this one really has a public interest in terms of thoroughfare. Now, I know people will say, oh, but there's a road just up there and there's another road just down there. But in terms of north-south movement through South Fremantle, this goat track through this laneway and the other laneways that essentially gets you down to Parmelia Park is a really well-known thoroughfare for community. And it's also active in terms of a play space for kids in an area, particularly, between Parmelia Park and Gold Street Park, there isn't very much. There's the Mills and Wares Park, but that really needs a complete revamp. So these sort of spaces have been particularly popular over the years for kids riding their bikes to the park, playing in the park, playing in the laneways and the like. My sense of where we're at, and I listened to the current owners of the laneway talk about, well, surely it doesn't cost $160,000 to upgrade this. Now, I know that the city's responsibilities and its specifications are here, and if it was the private laneway that only service private properties, their expectations would be down there and the cost difference would be huge. My sense is that if, we don't need laneways to be fully bitumised. I mean, I'm not sure why we haven't looked at perforated pavers or the like, where we don't have to go through and put in huge soak walls everywhere, that we look at those sort of pavers because the weeds will grow out through them and it will have a laneway feel rather than it feeling like it's, this bitumised airstrip from one end to the other. I accept that, as a public space, perhaps it does have to have lighting, but it doesn't have to have lighting at the same level, presumably, as a road where there is, conflict between cars and pedestrians and the like. So it does seem to me that there ought to be some middle ground here. And I also think that we do need to accept that if there is a public interest in keeping that laneway open for the things that I've just talked about, the connectivity, the walkability, the cycling, the play space that it creates, if there is a public benefit from doing that, there is probably also a public purse that should be funding at least part of that. So in other words, we haven't gone through the process to say, what's the public benefit? What's the private benefit? Is there a ratio? So there is a process there, which I think could also, we had a combination of reducing the cost because we didn't need to do it with soak walls everywhere and dig the whole bloody thing up and put soak walls in and then bitumise it. And we didn't need to have lights on 24/7, and we could look at the public benefit. Then the cost to the residents in that area, the SAR, might be significantly less, and that might change the outcome. The other thing is, what I looked at was dividing it into two. There is an area that is public benefit, which is walking through, and there's a clear area which really is only of a private benefit, and that's the dogleg. But that dogleg serves about 6 of the houses that are part of this proposal. If that was taken out of it and the costs were brought down, we might be looking at a very different outcome in terms of the SAR of that area. The other thing is, as was mentioned by the speakers, the reality is, even without the city investing a single cent, there are at least 3 houses in that area that realistically probably wouldn't be there if the laneway didn't exist. And that those properties have been paying rates to the city where we didn't need to spend a cent to get the tens of thousands of dollars of rates that are coming in because that laneway exists. And that's not necessarily the end of it. So the rates are contributing to the city in a way that simply wouldn't have been available if the laneway wasn't there. The last thing is, if we don't sort this out and the gates go up, which will be an inevitable result, I think, and we have a gated laneway, then we'll spend as much time dealing with the community about the loss of the amenity, the loss of the public interest in that area, as perhaps we'll deal with the time to try and get this fixed. I appreciate, a deferral doesn't probably have to be moved in that sense that there's still an opportunity for the applicant to come, will do all their work, as Councillor Williamson Wong was suggesting, that it's all their responsibility. But again, you go back to, is it actually their responsibility to do all of that work on behalf of 2 people, 2 households, on behalf of 15 or 16, or is in fact that an unfair burden? And is that not really something that we should be working on collectively and putting as many ideas into the pot to see if we can't find a way that gets the community of owners in that area over the line, but also brings the community at large into the process to identify the public benefit that we should be paying for, that component of it. So that's why I've got a deferral motion up. I don't think we can just go like we've done for the last 20 or 30 years, go too hard, not interested. We know all the other local governments have dealt with it, but it's just, we're Fremantle, we do it differently. We won't fix them because we're worried about it opening the can of worms that everybody else has managed to resolve.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. I just have a couple of comments on this one. As a city, we have a process to dedicate, laneways, and that process has run its course. And while this situation is, unfair for the few that are having to fund this, if we think our process is broken, then that's a separate conversation for us to have. I think I was actually pretty surprised that there was as much support for funding this as there was, because it wasn't that long ago with the GRV recalculation, South Fremantle got hit pretty hard with a pretty big rate raise, and then we've added underground power fees on top of that. So I was actually pretty surprised that there was that much support given these recent increases over there. And looking at Councillor Sullivan's, deferral motion, yes, it's a little bit of work for the city, but I think that gets us a little bit maybe further down the road of some things that we could investigate. And I don't really see any harm with potentially not closing the door on this now and doing that work and bringing that back when the officers have time to complete it. So I would be inclined to support a deferral on this one, just because, I think if we get some different answers and some different information, it may change the way that the neighbors feel about it and the way that council feels about it. But in the meantime, if we don't like the process for dedicating laneways, I think we should look at that separately. Councillor Graham.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I was nodding off there a little bit, sorry. Look, I've got a lot of sympathy for people with these laneways. And there's, over 120 in the little old city of Fremantle that have all had this same problem. And we've encountered many of them. And I wasn't going to say it, Councillor Williamson Wong, but yes, Delamere Lane, I've been banging on for it for close on 30 years now. Can you believe that? 1997. And I think people were banging on about it before. And there's 10 or 12 houses there. You talk about rates. Well, these people in Delamere Lane, just for, high-end houses, high-end rates, been paying for 30 years or whatever, and diddly squat. But anyway, that's just one of their problems. Councillor Sullivan goes on about the services and soak wells and all this sort of thing. Well, if you were to do something up in that lane, you know, and as the architects would know, all these services have to comply with Australian standards. So you're not just going to be able to put in a surfacing a bit of asphalt and think that's all right. You know, you do have to do it properly, and that's where the costs will come. So, and if it gets gated, well, that'll be the new norm. People will get used to it, and people will use the other two side streets. So, you know, sadly, I can't. Well, I support the officer's recommendation, but if you're going to have a look at this, it's got to be a separate process to just 19F Leafroy. I mean, you know, you're going to have to spend $100,000 on a report into all of them, and I mean, that's another discussion for another day. So, you know, I'd suggest and urge councillors to support the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Graham. Any further comment? Councillor Van Dorsen.
Thank you. I'm leaning towards supporting a deferral just based on some of the questions raised by Philip tonight as just around the consultation process and costs. I would like to have some more information on that, on sort of the options of upgrades, and definitely support everything Councillor Sullivan has said. Yeah, all the things to be considered with this particular laneway. Also share Jeff Graham, Councillor Graham's views on laneways and everything, and my concern, yeah, it is about precedent, unfortunately, a little bit. It's we've got 120 laneways, and this issue is extensive, so it's either that sort of big reporting assessment of all laneways and, you know, that sort of thing, but at the same time, we do have a process that's followed to follow with dedication of laneways. Yeah, this particular one, just given sort of the things raised tonight from presenters and Councillor Sullivan, yeah, I would support a deferral if it was moved. Otherwise, I'll be supporting the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. And just a reminder, because the motion is printed, anyone can actually move. The motion doesn't have to be Councillor Sullivan, a deferral, but usually it would be. Councillor Williamson Wong?
Question before Councillor Mothman closes.
No, I've got a question as well.
I've got a question too.
Question. Well,
Councillor Mothman.
all right. Yeah, sorry. Just to clarify, because there has been conversation in regards to the policy and the ability, or sorry, whether there's a need to refer to or review that. Can officers just advise when that policy was last reviewed, give or take, you know, a period of time, and also, thank you, and also what an additional review of that policy, you know, what would the process be around that? And then the question following, because this is related to an individual application, my assumption is that we can't, if you like, add a condition or anything related to this to say complete review of policy, that has to be a completely separate process.
Councillor Slaughter, did you have a question?
Yeah, I had the same question. Given that the policy listed on our website has a review date of the 25th of August 2025, is that on the list to be reviewed soon? And how will that impact what we do next with this item? And in leaning definitely towards a deferral in that case, if this can be progressed sooner rather than later.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Slaughter. To the CEO.
Well, through the chair, we'll accept it was August 25 as the review date. It's fairly significant. I think council would have to have an extensive conversation about how we deal with the whole 120 cohort rather than just one at a time. So I don't expect this is a cheap and cheerful exercise, and I don't expect it's quick.
Thank you. Councillor Williamson-Wong.
Thanks. Question. I'm glad that Councillor Mothman and Councillor Slaughter have raised that around reviewing the policy. I don't imagine that the deferral would what is asked for in the deferral would end up in the review of the policy, but that's a conversation for another time. My question is whether or not staff have an idea of what, if the deferral was passed, what are they willing, how much work are they willing to put in to investigate the planning, legal and costing of any other option? To me, it sounds like quite an extensive process to divide a piece of land up between 21 houses, or to try and convince 8 houses to share a dog leg. So I'm just wondering if there's any limits on what staff are. I mean, will we be engaging consultants to do this work? Because I imagine that the kind of knowledge isn't all in-house.
Thank you. The deferral refers to, I know it hasn't been moved yet, but we're speaking to it, just exploring the possibility. So doesn't say that has to come to a resolution on any of those items, just exploring. You can explore as much or as little on each one, I think, as you would want.
Sure, but I guess the question for staff is what are the limits for exploring possibilities? Because if it's a conversation for staff to have and present back to applicants to say, we think you should go engage consultants to figure this out, then that's far less of a kind of impact to our staff than saying, or to our budget, frankly, than engaging people to do that work.
I'll put that over to the director to answer.
Thank you, through the chair. We did have a quick look at the some of the content of the referral motion. There's certainly some legal opinion we'd need in there about certainly slicing part of that laneway off the eastern section. We need to keep access to those owners in perpetuity. And I don't know how that would work when we start selling off portions of the laneway. So it would be a fairly complex bit of work. We could do it. If it's work you want us to do, we would obviously gladly get on with it, but it's not a small piece.
Any other questions, or did Councillor Mufflin wish to close?
Thank you. Yeah, good conversation, and I think the vexed nature of our laneways in the city is reflected in that discussion. I still stand by supporting the officer's recommendation to refuse. I don't think it would be appropriate for us to try and design this one on the run, and if we do have an appetite for it, it has to be through revisiting the policy and understanding how we address this across the city, and the desire or ability to put funds towards this, towards addressing laneways over a long period of time. If we start doing this piecemeal, then we're going to find ourselves in a lot of pain.
All right, all those in favor of the officer's recommendation? That's all those against. Councillor Sullivan. I don't think that item being voted that way means that it's shut down all conversations, though, but it has been voted down, or the officer's recommendation has been supported. Now, that was item 10, so we'll go back to the agenda. Number 4, Marine Terrace, change of use. We have someone to move the officer's recommendation. Councillor Graham, seconded by Councillor Van Dorsen. Any discussion? All right, well then all those in favor of the officer's recommendation? That is unanimous, right? Now, we have some planning policies next up. I would just like to ask if anyone wishes to speak on any of the planning policies. Councillor Van Dorsen?
Excuse me. C26038, the amendments to the advertisements and signs policy.
Does anyone wish to speak on any of the other planning policies? So that's item 5, 6, and 7. Seeing none, I would ask someone if they would be willing to move those 3 on block. Councillor Mufflin, seconded by Councillor Graham. All those in favor of items 5, 6, and 7, unanimous. And we'll go to item 8. The local planning policy, advertisements and signs, moved by Councillor Van Dorsen, seconded by Councillor Slaughter, Councillor Van Dorsen.
Thank you. Just briefly, just wanted to thank the officers for their work on amending the policies, and in particular this one. It did come up as a bit of an issue, I believe it was last year or since I've been on council, with a DA for advertisements in the city. I think this amended policy is great. I think it's strengthened the policy and will help, but in the same way help us make more discretionary decisions in some ways, and considering them on proposals on their merits and appropriate to the context, and all the important things to consider with our planning applications. I just also wanted to note I was a bit disappointed with amendment number 3, which changes shall and must to should as draft guidance, and Councillor Williams and Wong brought that up at the when we were discussing this item before, and I absolutely agreed. It jumped out at me on the page as well when I read the agenda. Yeah, understand, guided by the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage there, and policies, in light of policies being not statutory documents, but just matters to be considered and given weight. And anyway, I would prefer our policies to be strong, given they're not statutory, and have strong language and things, but yeah, appreciate why it's been amended. Don't really object to it, but just wanted to note it. Yeah, that was all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Van Dorsen. Any other comments on this item? Seeing none, I'll put it to a vote. All those in favour? That is unanimous. That's great. Item 9 is the Planning Information Report, moved by Councillor Graham, seconded by Councillor Williamson Wong. Seeing no discussion, all those in favour? Unanimous. We've done item 10. We're on item 11, which is the Bridge Closure Advocacy Report. Mover for that. Councillor Van Dorsen, seconded Williamson Wong.
Thank you. I am speaking a lot tonight, which is a bit unusual. Yeah, thank you, and thank you for the officers' report on this one. As noted in the report, we've had some ongoing advocacy with ministers and the Bridge Alliance group, as well as local community. I think I'm really pleased and proud of the work we're doing and the engagement. The Bridge Alliance has been fantastic, and yeah, ministers have open meeting with us. It's been getting a lot of media coverage, and I think we've done a great job with the engagement, and also achieved some positives with the advocacy we've done. We didn't get everything we asked for, which not expected, but I think working positively with the authorities and a commitment to continue that work is really important. And just noting we are continuing that work and have some ongoing issues with the bridge closure in terms of rat running, and my inbox is flooded just about every day with complaints. But so look forward to ongoing. We'll continue that, watch this space. Hopefully we get some more good outcomes and can make some improvements where there's identified issues. But yeah, really do appreciate the Alliance, and I guess I think they're implementing the changes even on the run. I've seen in North Fremantle, we've had an issue, local businesses really taking a hit in North Fremantle, like a big hit with not having that through traffic. Like I had a conversations, and it's having a big impact financially on them. So thank you to the city, and they're grateful to the city for their offers of support, but compared to what their losses are is scary stuff. But, you know, pleased to see they're still engaging with Alliance, and they've asked, you know, the digital signage to be changed on the highway. So, because previously it all said bridge closure, consider alternate route. So so some of that's been changed. I just saw today, literally, it's been changed to something about local businesses. So now it says bridge closure. Instead of saying bridge closure, next slide saying consider alternate route, it says local businesses open. So it's bridge closure, local businesses open, which is great. They have missed one sign, the one closest to the local businesses, so I'll be on them to hopefully change that one as well. But yeah, I think overall, I think traffic management's been great on the highway. Again, we've got issues with rat running, particularly on Thompson Road, that really do need attention and to be resolved. It's a bit of a critical issue, I feel. But overall, yeah, really pleased with all stakeholders in this process, and the city and everyone for working together through a very difficult time. I think in terms of the officers' recommendation, I mean, my preference, I would like to have it amended just to sort of reflect just note, also council note the bridge closure advocacy information report and the ongoing engagement with all stakeholders. But also I'd like the sort of not mentioned in there is possibly, the ongoing reporting to council. Like I'd sort of like to be updated on things if there is ongoing conversations. We have made that commitment to the community and other, the Alliance did as well for ongoing engagement. So I would like some ongoing reporting back to us as well so that we can stay updated. Possibly I did speak with other councillors about possibly bi-monthly or something, just through the bridge closure period, just to make sure everything's ticking along. But yeah, I'll let others contribute to the discussion.
Thank you, Councillor Van Dorsen. Councillor Williamson-Wong?
Thanks. I echo Councillor Van Dorsen's gratitude in this coming back to us. I think it's great, and I am appreciative of the work that staff and elected members have done, especially our North Ward councillors, in terms of engaging with community on this as the bridge closure continues. I do support Councillor Van Dorsen in, the intention of the report to us is that the advocacy is ongoing, but I do wonder whether if there was an amendment, whether it should have gone into our official docs, and if that's something we can add now. Would be a question for staff. I mean, I support it, the notion of it, but whether or not procedurally we're allowed to just amend things like that would be for...
If it's a minor amendment, yeah, we can accept that. And it does say in the report that the advocacy is ongoing. So it's already kind of set in there. And I think that our community would expects us to continue with that as well. This report is before us just to remind everybody because of your wonderful notice of motion that asks that we report back by March. So so that's why this report is before us now, is to close off that nom. There's nothing to stop the city and staff from reporting our further ongoing efforts. Councillor Clark?
I agree with everything Councillor Van Dorsen has said. The vast majority of the bridge is and traffic is moving, which is great. There's been an increase in use of bicycles and people with their bikes on trains, so I do thank the Minister and Public Transport for allowing that to happen between North Fremantle and Fremantle. We still do have a problem with Thompson Road and rat running, and my inbox is also full, and sometimes we get the same email, but also we receive additional emails that are just to us, so there are a lot of people writing about that, and we have not forgotten you. It is an ongoing conversation, and the Bridge Alliance do recognise that, and it's something that sits around not only how the traffic moves, but also the businesses involved and how things are affecting them, both in North Fremantle and in the east end of town, because it's very quiet over near where Officeworks is. Given that blockage for Canning Highway being able to come directly through now. As Councillor Van Dorsen said, is it too late? Are we able to put in that we'd like to have an update in another couple of months' time? We don't want to make them frequently, and we know that we're working in the background, but I just feel it's really important that we keep communicating out to everybody to let them know where it's at. We're going to have changes in the amount of traffic. We're going to have changes in how many people are using public transport, especially as we go into winter. So I just feel that would be really pertinent to have.
I understand where you're coming from, Councillor Clark, on that, but I think adding something that creates additional things to come to council is no longer a minor amendment. It would be a full amendment, but I also don't think we necessarily need an amendment for that to happen, for us to continue reporting back. I have every expectation that will continue. And also, I just want to say, the work that's happened on this is not the result of any one person. It's the result of a lot of elected members pitching in and doing bits. And that's why we've gotten as far as we have right now. So I think we'll just continue on with that, and we'll keep making the improvements as we can. So we wouldn't have done all this stuff without the help of a lot of elected members. Councillor Slaughter.
Thank you. I'd just like to urge all councillors to accept this advocacy information report, noting the last sentence itself says that periodic updates will be provided to elected members throughout the bridge closure, and then we are free to discuss them whenever we like. Thank you.
Any other comments? Seeing none, we'll put this up for a vote. All those in favor? That's unanimous. Last item, statutory reports, our budget review. Moved by Councillor Kamada, seconded by Councillor Graham. Any discussion, Councillor Kamada?
Yeah, I've just got a question, please. In this item, budget review, on the number 3, capital revenue, and the number 4, capital expenditure section, the town hall performance infrastructure upgrade, grant unsuccessful, and that's reflected again in table 4. And I'd just would like to ask for a comment from the Director of Creative Arts and Community. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Through the chair, we applied to Lottery West for production funding for both Victoria Hall and Town Hall. We were successful for the Victoria Hall ask, but not for Town Hall. The reason given was that it was a competitive funding round, and they chose to fund our lower request based on the fact that as a local government, we have greater access to funds than a lot of the other applicants. We've since gone back to Lottery West and asked them to consider allowing us to expend the Vic Hall funding, which is $282,000 across both Vic Hall and Town Hall, to help us establish a quality but minimum level of production in both venues.
Great, thank you. And I'll just remind members of the public gallery that there is no recording or pictures taken during the council. Yeah. No. Any other comments on this item? Seeing none, we'll put it up for a vote. All those in favor? And that is unanimous. Great. Seeing there's no motions of which previous notice has been given, there's no urgent business, no late items, no confidential business. Move the meeting closed at 7:57 p.m. Great work, everyone.